right, good evening. It is Monday night, right around 9 o'clock Eastern Time, and you are on with the 13th Fleet After Action Report. I am your host, Chris. It is good to have you with us tonight. We are going to be talking a lot about X-Wing today, so I apologize to all you Armada fans. But I do want to remind you guys that there is a tournament going on December 9th near Dayton. Don't have all the details yet. I'll try to fill you in on that as I get them. I've just reached out to the tournament organizer, and I'm going to see what I can do about streaming at that event. So maybe you'll get to see some actual Armada tournament action, which would be really, really cool. It would be the first time that I've actually gotten to stream a tournament game. I also want to apologize to you guys about this past week. It has been holiday week, so that's kind of crazy anyway. But on top of that, I ran into some technical difficulties. Timing just didn't work out. New job situation. So, yeah, I didn't get to stream anything that I had planned to stream the past couple of weeks. The good news is that tomorrow we will be at Chaotic Good again, streaming X-Wing, and we will be at Chaotic Good again on Thursday, streaming Armada. So we're going to be really thrilled about that. And speaking about streaming X-Wing at Chaotic Good, I have with me today my guest Dexter Ollis, who is going to be one of the people on the stream because I was intrigued at his approach to bombers. I was actually there at the event on Tuesday, got to see some of it, was excited to see how it turned out. Did you enjoy playing the bombers there?
Yeah, it was my first time with bombers. I've recently, as you guys, if you listen to the other one I was on, I've been playing Republic. I've recently been buying into Empire, and so this was my first game getting to run a list with any bombers in it, and it was a lot of fun. They bombed.
They bombed in a good way. Let's rephrase that
In the
there.
best way, yeah.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about how you approach the game.
Yeah, so it started with the list building, of course, and I think, the core three, the core bomber, it all builds around, of course, is Jonas. And then if you're using a multi-bomber list, that is, if you're using a multi-bomber list, you start with Jonas, and then you kind of build around him. Next is usually Tomax, and then the third slot, most people fill in either with Deathfire or with Major Rhymer. I opted for Major Rhymer just because I preferred his ability. He gave me an extra range. I took the barrage rockets on him. I know some people use cluster missiles because cluster missiles you get 0 to 3, but I was okay with barrage rockets in the 1 to 3 and just taking better advantage of a potential double mod using Jonas's ability combined with the focus that you take for barrage rockets. And then the rest of the list, I decided to go with something I haven't really seen with the bombers before, which was 2 advanced X1s, and then the 2-point generic TIE fighter to fill in. I used Merrick Steel and Zertic Strom, both with cluster missiles to fill in, and kind of flew them in a chunk with the bombers, both because they have that range bonus of being able to shoot 3 dice from 1 to 3, as well as it gives me a little bit of shields and just a little bit more opportunity to take advantage of Jonas's ability. But it's even more important to you as an opponent to kill him now, but it's even harder because he's surrounded by so many people that are going to be rolling, double modded 3 dice shots. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of firepower to throw at somebody. And I know you were playing against Chris Emick, who has been running a very experimental fleet where he's tossing around tokens, and I feel like it's a really defensive build that he was running, but I don't think he was prepared for all the offense that you were throwing out there.
No, he did. I ended up winning the game. I think part of that was the list, of course. I had a lot of firepower, and even with his list, if you're using everything on defense and you're not doing much on offense, which was the case, and I didn't take a whole lot of damage. I think I had already killed 2 of his ships, of his 5-ship list, before he had dealt a damage to me. I could be wrong. I might have only killed 1, but I definitely knocked quite a bit of his health out before he had been able to even get a good shot off on my ships, because he had to use everything he had in focus and evades for defensive dice. And he's still, part of it's too that he's still getting used to that list. He flew a little bit more aggressively with Boudica and Sabine than I think he should have. He ended up having them without being able to really shoot with Fenrau, Benthic, or Hera. Like Hera didn't get a good shot off all game. Benthic got bad shots left for 2 turns, and Fenrau got I think maybe one or two good shots the whole game. So he kind of overcommitted with Boudica and Sabine, which left the rest of them not able to assist, and those are the 2 ships that I took off the board pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think it does surprise people a little bit that the bombers are as maneuverable as they are. I mean, they're definitely not interceptors, but they can still do some surprising moves on there. In fact, I think if you talk to Ethan about my 5Ks, he will get a little bit a little bit salty there. But bombers also tend to have that good hull value, which I think is something that a lot of people will underestimate, especially since they don't have any shields.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, 6 hull, it can go pretty quick. I also like that they're 2 dice. I know, like, the Y Wings are kind of the equivalent that the Republic has, but they're, only 1 die. Maybe I guess a more 6 health and 2 dice. You have the V19 Torrents, but those don't get the opportunity. They have much worse dials. I guess those are a more one-to-one comparison for their dials have most of the same moves, but like I think everything in 3 is red except a straight. You have red 3 banks, which is awful, and red 3 sharps. And so you have a lot less opportunity to go quickly with that. Whereas with the bomber, like you said, the only thing that's red are the K turns, which you'd expect those to be red. And you've got all of 2, all of 3. You can go 4 straight. You can one straight and 1 bank. So you've got a hell of a lot of mobility in these bombers. And the X1s are pretty similar in their dial, so it makes it easier to fly them together too.
You also have the benefit of a little bit of repositioning, because you could do the barrel roll into a red target lock, which is not a bad thing. Now, it's not necessarily what you want to do if you're running the barrage rockets, which is what most people like to do. But on the other hand, it is something that's a possibility, especially if you go with a bomber that doesn't have the same kind of loadout. Because, I mean, you can't take barrage rockets with, say, I don't think Deathfire can take them. I don't think he has space in the loadout.
Let me see.
Yeah, we'll take a look here. And
Yeah, looks like Deathfire has space for barrage rockets loadout wise, but he does not have 2 missile slots. So he's not able to take barrage rockets because he's lacking the second missile slot.
Yeah, that's where most of the issues run into, is the double missile slots that are required for the better barrage rockets there. So sometimes you have to figure out some tricky things with the builds to figure out exactly what it is that you want to do with them. And wow, that image came up much bigger than it should have. But we'll take a closer look. Now, the good thing is that they all still have that nimble bomber, which allows you to do some better tricks with your bombs. And I think a lot of people tend to overlook bombs because, it's really passive damage. But on the other hand, if you know how to place them, they're really good. Now, we were already talking about Deathfire, so let's keep on that particular topic, because one thing that I've been curious to try, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, is if you go with the Deathfire that is not the standard loadout, he has that ability after you are destroyed, before you are removed, you may perform an attack and drop or launch 1 device. So combining him with somebody with swarm tactics, so that he gets to go earlier in the round, since he's only initiative 2, then possibly after he gets removed, you're still getting a double tap out of him. Sounds kind of interesting to me, but then again, it also sounds like people may ignore him because of that and then give you an additional target.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really fun to play around with that ability because it gives you the opportunity to, even without swarm tactics, You as an opponent, you really have to view it differently than a standard two, because if it's, it doesn't matter whether you try and initiative kill it or not. He's going to get to drop to shoot, and if you do kill it, then he has the opportunity to launch a device as well, or drop one, depending on where he's at and the positioning he's in. So you have to definitely view it differently. I think using the swarm tactics could be a really interesting idea, especially against, similar lists or other lists that have some fours that come into play. I know a lot of lists don't use a whole lot under three, at least not frequently that I've seen. But a lot of lists do include fours. Like this one, for example, has Captain Jonas, and if you have Major Rhymer that a lot of people run, or even run into somebody else with a Deathfire, I think you could definitely get that double tap off, and that would be a lot more value than you'd think out of this 3-point Deathfire to get to shoot more than once with those with any type of rockets that you put on him.
And we can go ahead and look at Jonas, because Jonas is pretty important to most bomber builds here. And the reason why he's important, now you have to fly in formation, you've got to get some practice in there to do that, but while you're at range 0 to 1, you perform a missile or a torpedo attack, then you get to reroll up to 2 attack dice, which is at least half of your attack dice in most of the events that you're going through.
Yeah, and I think, like as we mentioned, with the way that he's built, usually it's 2/3 of them. Usually you're using a lot of barrage rockets, maybe a cluster missile in there, and so you're getting most of your dice rerolled. And with three, I mean, on average, you're getting at least a hit or a crit in there already, so you don't need to worry about rerolling all three most of the time.
And then you combine that with saturation salvo, which most of your bombers are going to take anyway, and you really, really have done a lot to stack the dice in your favor. And you're talking about, 3 or 4 points per bomber with a lot of firepower that's coming out. You throw 3 bombers at somebody. If you're really good at focusing on targets, and if you're, flying in formation, it should make it fairly easy to focus on the right target. Then that's going to be hard to deal with.
Yeah, especially with those barrage rockets taking the focus are really lethal, because it allows you to alternate your target. If something else goes on, you have a bomb goes off that hits one person and not somebody else, and all of a sudden, well, okay, if I don't have any damage on, I might as well hit the guy, focus the fire in. So being able to just swap targets like that on the fly with barrage rockets, so you're able to really focus whoever's been taking hits, is super important to,
and I mean, if you roll well,
mobility.
and if you roll well, then you get to save the focus token for your defense, which, while two dice is pretty good for a bomber, on the other hand, it's not amazing. You're going to get hit a lot. You are. Which leads me to my biggest concern with playing bombers is the fact that they don't have shields means that you are taking crits. And knowing how to deal with those crits could be really, really important. What kind of suggestions do you think would help mitigate that?
I think part of it is if you don't need to know like all the percentages, but just kind of understand what are the odds that you'll get a crit that affects something. Like what are the odds that I get a crit that, there's I forget the name of them in particular, but, increase the difficulty of your banks or sharp maneuvers. And, if you don't do if you don't do a straight maneuver, the next non-straight maneuver you do, take a damage and then repair this card. And things like that, because those are going to be some of the biggest ones that'll affect you, especially when you're flying in formation. One less attack die hurts a lot, but one less attack die would be much better than having to do a different maneuver than the rest of the other two, other 4, other 5 ships you're flying with, and then ending up with a bunch of self bumps. You could end up with no actions and a lot more damage if you're not able to maneuver the way that you really want to. So I think understanding the odds of those and being able to, figure out a adjustment plan for how you're going to deal with those is important. I also think, part of the fun of it can be figuring out what are you going to do even when you take those. So, for example, one list, I haven't tried this, but that I've kind of toyed with the idea with that I think would be fun, is the TIE RB Heavy Flight Leader Ubble. His pilot ability is, after a friendly ship at range 0 to 2 defends, if it was dealt a damage card, you may perform a bonus attack against the attacker. If you're not familiar with the heavies, they also don't have shields. So you're kind of in a position where you could fly, for example, flight leader Hubble, and if you defend and you take anybody defends and anybody takes any damage, you're getting a second attack off, probably with synced laser cannons you'd be using on him. And so, you can kind of use that and take him in a more aggressive way than you usually take the heavies. With the heavies, a lot of times you take the reinforces, but you could take the target assist configuration and go for a really aggressive build with that heavy, and then kind of present a weird scenario to your opponent where they have to pick, do I take out this 5-point heavy that's shooting 3 dice twice a turn with calculate tokens and a target lock, or do I take out Jonas that's giving these barrage rockets double mods? Because that's a scary heavy if you don't get them off the board. And so finding ways to incorporate the rest of your list that they'll deal with the crits, punish your opponent for dealing them out. It can be kind of fun in my opinion.
I've been toying with the idea of doing a bomber heavy list that is focused more on cluster missiles to spread out some damage, and then for defensive purposes bring in Delmico in a regular TIE fighter. While a friendly ship at range 0 to 2 defends against a damaged attacker, the defender may reroll 1 defense die. And on the surface, that sounds really, really good. But then we also not last week, but 2 weeks ago, really discussed what the odds were on the dice. And I don't know how well that actually helps with defense.
Yeah, I think it's like you run into with almost all of Empire. That's one of the Empire's, strong or weak points, depending on how you view it, is the dice luck changes your game a lot with Empire. More than, running Republic, all my ships have shields, and I can run a 6-ship list that has 400 health. But running a 6-ship list in Empire, even if I have the same amount of health, I've got very few shields in it. In my list that I'm running with these 2 advanced X1s, I've got 2 ships with shields. But I think you don't usually see that even 2 ships with shields in an Empire list.
And they only have 1 shield, if I'm correct, 1 shield apiece. I know the Vader TIE Advance has 2, but I seem to recall most TIE Advances only have the 1. Is that correct?
I think you're shorting them by 1. I think it's that the Vader cards have 3, and then the standard X1s like Merrick Steele has 2 shields. So they've got 3 hull and 2 shields, and then the Vader has the extra shield up to 6 health total.
Yeah, you are correct on that. Yeah, that is my mistake there. I knew they were lower than Vader on that. But you're kind of running TIE Advances like supplemental bombers, right?
Yeah, it's not really the way that I ran them in the past, and it's not the way you see a lot of people run them, because they benefit from, that's their advanced targeting computer, is that if you perform a primary attack, you get to roll 3 dice and use a crit. But I was thinking about how to build my list, and I was like, I could use some shields. I'm not running Flight Leader and Hubble in this one. I want people that can take crits without stressing about it. And I want somebody that can take has the opportunity to succeed in a closer range engagement. Because that's what you run into. That's one of your scariest things with barrage rockets. A triple barrage rocket bomber block is what happens when you're flying against Chris Emick and he gets Boudica and Fenrau up in your face at range 1, and all of a sudden he's rolling 4 dice and you're rolling 3 with just a focus. And you're not going to find a whole lot of success there in that engagement. But if you bring in, the 2, I have Merrick with Swarm Tactics as well, so Zertik is shooting at I-5 as well. So you bring in 2 I-5s that are shooting cluster missiles, and then, if they don't get the opportunity to shoot at cluster missiles, then they can still, if they have the lock on somebody, shoot at range 3 with a primary attack and shoot 3 dice. You just have a lot more flexibility in how you can engage there, because normally with a bomber block you really have to, that's why they have the 5 cases. You need to utilize them to avoid being in range 1 engagements, because they'll fall apart. But with bringing in those X1s, you kind of change the norm in that. Are you really taking an advantage by engaging me at range 1, or are you giving me 2 ships that are shooting cluster missiles, each twice with Captain Jonas's ability with rerolls? If you get that close, and all of a sudden you're not that's not a really favorable engagement for you, even if my bombers aren't as successful as they'd usually be.
So are
So
you
that was kind of the idea behind it.
so are you running the advances kind of like a screen?
Yeah, so in my block, I had like the way that I flew them, I had Tomax Bren all the way on the outside. Just inside of him, I had in a straight line, um, Reimer in the front, and then Jonas in the back. And then to the right of them, so on the most inside, I was flying from the back left corners where I set up. On the most inside, I flew my two X1s so that they would be the primary target. And also because if they're the most inside and I'm flying from the outside corner, as I get closer to them, those are the guys that are going to be range one, as well as Major Reimer, who can shoot his barrage rockets range one. So I was trying to set it up so that I could possibly get off some range one shots with those guys and still have Jonas and Bren at a range that's acceptable of two, so that I can get all my missiles off in a turn without needing to worry about it. So even if you get to that range one, but I try and set up with them inside as a shield for the rest of my bombers, so that I if you fall on that range 1 to 2 question range, you're going to get hit with all 5 missiles, plus cluster missiles shooting twice if you're not really careful.
So do you keep Reimer with the X1s, or do you keep Reimer back with the regular bombers?
I flew all 5 of them together. Like I flew all 5 of them as a swarm,
Okay.
but the innermost 2 ships were the X1s, and then Reimer was the like if you think of like a block, right, of 4 ships,
Yeah.
and then there's one on the outside. Outside is Tomax, and then there's back hiding corner is Jonas, so he's range 1 of all of them. And then there's this shield right here, this corner of protection that is 2 X1s and Reimer, because they can all shoot their missiles at range 1. So that's kind of how I chose to fly it. I've only flown this list once. I'm going to use it again this upcoming Tuesday, tomorrow on stream, like you mentioned. But yeah, I'm kind of using them as a corner protective trio in front of Jonas, and then Jonas and Tomax will be just a little bit behind, but still in that range 1, so that they're able to hopefully get their range 2 shot for their barrage rockets.
Okay, and then you've got the 2-point tie that's essentially collecting objectives as best it can.
Yeah, I mean it's in my game against Chris, it didn't even get to pick anything up, but that's because Chris shot Sabine and Boudica out, and Sabine rolled higher and got to move first. So Sabine made it to my side of the board the second turn and picked up the crate that my TIE fighter was hoping to, which she paid for. So whatever I can use it for. But yeah, I think with so many of the objectives being based on either needing to use an action or needing a body somewhere that's not where the rest of your ships are going to be, I was very happy with being able to fit in the 2-point ship, because other than enchants, it's a 2-die gun that's not going to be super modded. It's not very useful. But in the other 3 game modes that you'll play in every 4 games, it'll be a big help and hopefully earn more than 2 points worth of objectives. I think that's fair to expect most of the time, unless they really target it, which is still a win for me.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. In my 3-bomber build, I was trying to get a little bit more consistent offense out of the whole group, and so I lean more into double TIE fighters that had some complementary effects or did well when they got in close. But I got to be honest, I really like your idea, and I may be stealing it. See how I can toy around with the TIE advances and make them work as an effective screen and get some extra damage out there.
Yeah, and I know some people do even run the 4th bomber. They run Reimer and Deathfire. I think there's a world where that could work. I'd like to toy with the idea of running those 2. And so instead of the 2 X1s and a 2-pointer, so you got 13 points in bombers instead, you could run Lieutenant Laurier as a 3-point interceptor, and almost use him as your separate ship. And then you'd have another 4 points to take an X1, for example. So you could still end up with a 5 missile ordnance squadron, and trade out one of those X1s for the 4th bomber, so for Deathfire instead in my list. And then you'd have a stronger, individual pilot. I haven't flown that, obviously, but I know some people like to use all 4 of the bomber pilots. So I wonder if that's a fun list to run.
I'm not sure. The concern that I have with running Deathfire is largely that he would be unable to take the barrage rockets, given that
Yeah.
he only has the one missile slot. I'm sure he's got some other tricks. What kind of loadout do you think would be interesting with Deathfire? I mean, because
I mean,
he does have the double torpedo slot, and he would
yeah,
still get the benefit from he would still get the benefit from Captain Jonas using torpedoes. So
yeah, I'd say. I mean, you could get really funky with the way that his loadout's built. I know you mentioned, potentially using swarm tactics. So let's say, for example, we're using Merrick in the X1 as the fifth ship, and then we have Lieutenant Lareer. If Merrick brings Deathfire up to an I5, then you can use plasma torps on Deathfire. The only risk you'd have with that is that, of course, you have to get the target lock, and he's I2, so you'd have to get pretty close on his move to make sure that you can guarantee the target lock.
right,
But I'd toy around with the plasma torps because you'd still shoot them at I5 if you get that swarm tactics, and then you can use him to tear off shields before you just go crazy with the barrage rockets and cluster missiles if you're using those. Other than that, if I wasn't going to use that, I'm not sure what
I
I would
mean
use. Maybe clusters.
the other interesting option is if you are using swarm tactics, then with the one missile slot you could use thread tracers and then still have the backup with the ion torps or homing torps or even plasma torps as the secondary shot. So your first goal with Deathfire with the swarm tactics, you get the lock on and share the lock with everybody, and then if he does get destroyed, he's got the lock so that he can throw the torpedoes of some sort.
Yeah, I think that could be a really nasty combo if you get it to work in your favor in a battle. That's like Deathfire's ability. There's so much to play around with because he has the opportunity to do a lot of things that you don't see in most. I mean, let alone a bomber, but in most ships. Um, yeah, I think that thread tracers, if he was swarm tactics up to I5 with for example, Merrick or any other I5 in the Empire, he has the opportunity to do that, and then he would still have a target lock for plasma torps, homing torps, for example, even ion torps. Disable whatever was shooting at him. Yeah, I think that could be pretty interesting to work with and see what you're able to do with that.
And I mean, a lot of people will say that that's kind of overkill, like you're throwing way too much dice manipulation with the lock on there, on top of Jonas, on top of saturation salvo. But I don't consider it overkill. I consider it guaranteeing victory.
Yeah, I think like of course there are situations where the target lock wouldn't be useful because of Jonas's ability, but I think it provides you. I'm thinking of two situations where it would be really useful. The first one that we see a lot of in the way the meta is built is having any strong ship as your primary ship for your opponent. You're flying Han, you're flying Lando, you're flying against some people like to run Scum with a Millennium Falcon. Some people like to run CIS sometimes with like a fire spray. Well, that's a 7, 8, 9 point ship, and you might lose Jonas before you can get the kill off. So if you're able to, with Deathfire, apply those target locks, then all of a sudden they can blow the hell out of Jonas, and they're still getting a double modded shot, quite a few double modded shots into the next turn.
Yeah,
And then, because Deathfire has the target lock the next turn, regardless of the situation, you can just fire the plasma torps off.
right.
Um, the other situation is, I mean, similar, but in any game, I mean, use the thread tracers to set yourself up for, breaking formation and losing that Jonas buff because he's not going to last every game. He's not going to last most games. He's a pretty high priority target
Yeah,
because he does only have 2 dice and 6 hull with no shields. He can be pretty easy to blow off the board in a turn. Your goal is to get more value out of him in that turn than they get out of killing him. But yeah, I think with the thread tracers, you could kind of eliminate the worry of losing Jonas as long as you have a central target. It'd be a little bit harder against some of the like Republic six ship lists, or against another bomber list that doesn't have a a made like a big 7 point target.
Yeah.
But like playing a bomber list that has like a decimator in it, well, yeah, I'm gonna take that target lock and you're gonna have to take that reinforce as I spread my forces around you and make you choose between front and back. Because I can break formation all of a sudden. It's not important once I have those target locks.
Yeah, now I'm looking at the points to try to figure out, okay, exactly how many points is this if we look at doing this, because that is kind of tight there, and I don't know how much room you have for, because I feel like you don't want to use the swarm tactics on one of your bombers. Your bomber loadouts are so pre-planned out that you really don't have that option there. You're going to have something in there to allow Deathfire to take advantage of that. So I'm just trying to.
For sure, I think a few names that jump out at me, kind of depending on what you want to fly. The biggest one I would say would be Merrick or Juno. Probably Merrick because the X1 has such a similar dial to the bomber, so it's really easy to fly those with bombers. They have all the same moves, other than the X1 can go 5 straight instead of 4 straight if they want, and the X1 instead of a 3K they have 3 talons. But other than that, it's very very similar dials. The other name I'm thinking is you could put in like Volt Scaris. His ability's not great, but for 4 points, he'd get you a Swarm Tactics up to I5. If you wanted to spend the extra point, of course, you could get like Soon to Your Fell, some other names in there. But for 4 points, the first ones I'm thinking of are Volt Scaris and Merrick Steel.
Yeah, I'm looking
to
at
get those bombers up to I5.
I'm looking at Merrick, and I think that would be a really really good option there, and that still actually leaves you with 3 points. So you could have something pretty solid in there, I think.
Yeah, that's. I think I mentioned like Lieutenant Laurier would be a go-to for me. He's the 3 point interceptor. I think the only 3 point interceptor. He's only I3, but realistically, you know, in this situation, you could use him exactly the same as I use that generic TIE fighter or as people use Sabine, except he has the opportunity to put out quite a bit more firepower than any of those do. Um, with 3 points, you could also do maybe like Gideon Hask if you were looking for a really heavy, just damage list. Gideon Hask with like concussions could be pretty scary in that situation. He'd be shooting 4 dice, with a target lock.
Yeah, I'm looking at options now and seeing what all's out there, because I think, man, there's a lot of possibilities out there. Let's see. You said the TIE interceptor, Laurier.
Yeah, Lieutenant Laurier. He's the only well, I don't know if he's the only I3, but he's I3, but he's the only 3 point interceptor.
Right.
And with him, you could run. I mean, I've seen people run him with Lone Wolf. Obviously, he'd be flying him by himself. If you wanted to, I personally, I don't know the exact statistics on it, but especially the more dice you get, I really prefer the target lock to a focus most of the time. So you could run like I was thinking about running like crack shot on him. You could run like crack shot or elusive with a targeting computer, and his action would be to take a target lock, or let me see. He doesn't have any linked actions, but you can do any action into a red barrel roll or boost. So you could take a target lock into a red boost or barrel roll, and that's a lot of offensive capabilities, especially if you do take like trick shot or crack shot, and that's your like solo runner. That's your objective runner that you're able to do so much with. So the 3 point objective runner, to get the 6th ship in the list leaves you a lot of room to kind of mess around and do whatever you want.
Yeah, I mean, Magna Tolvan would be an interesting choice, just because of the sheer loadout on a TIE fighter.
Yeah.
It gives you a good cannon choice there, and you can, after you gain a stress token, you may perform a white action if able. So extra actions with a TIE fighter that has a good cannon on it would be a pretty interesting choice. And with a loadout of 10, I mean, man.
Yeah, that's pretty nasty. You could run like ion cannon, targeting computer, and lone wolf, and potentially get the double modded, target lock focus ion cannon, or you could do that with the heavy cannon as well if you're confident in your bullseyes. Maybe instead of lone wolf, you do crack shot.
Yeah.
Well, not crack shot, I guess, because you'd be using the cannon, but elusive to give them a little more survivability. Maybe trick shot or something like that. That could be pretty nasty.
Hell, even throwing a tractor beam on there just to mess around with people's defense could really confuse people, especially if you're flying them out there as a lone wolf. It makes people have to pay attention to them. Odd theory crafting that we come up with.
I mean, that's for me. That's a lot of the fun. I know some people don't even list build. I know we got a local player, Gordon. I don't think he list builds at all. Of course, he understands the process. He's a pretty good flyer, but he just doesn't find joy in it. But for me, that's a lot of the fun of the game. Is what can I do that I don't see other people doing that could you'd still compete in its own way. And this, I think that's it's got some merit to its.
That's one of the things that I really, really enjoyed in other competitive games that I've played is just coming up with new ideas that may challenge what other people are playing and see how that stacks up. I've really, really enjoyed playing Empire. At some point, I'm going to need to branch out, but Empire is where I get my start, and I only have limited funds, so I can't buy everything and try everything. But I am anxious to see what some of the factions can do, especially I think the Republic, simply because they have so many tricks that allow them to share things with each other. It's kind of a symbiotic relationship, but it is a very complicated list building process as well when you look at the Republic.
Yeah, the Republic list that I won the store championship with was built around building an action economy where if I shoot with this ship first, then this ship gets a target lock, and then if I shoot with that ship, I can pass the target lock to somebody else to use, and just kind of building. You have to set it up a certain way so that you can make sure all of your triggers go off, but it's so rewarding when you're able to get that set up. And even in an Empire list like this, the big trigger that you're building around is Jonas, right? But in that, you've got 5 ships or 6 ships that all need to be in the right spot to shoot. Otherwise, you mess up. And so it can be a lot of fun. It can also be really frustrating. You can ask Sean that I beat. He was also flying a Republic list, and he missed one of his triggers that ultimately, won me the game, lost him the game. And so when you do build a list like that, you have to really get a lot of practice in to remember all those triggers and understand how to fly it right. But it can be super rewarding when you do. And it's a lot of fun to build lists around.
Well, I definitely think that I'm going to be looking at trying this Deathfire 4 bomber list, although I'm going to have to borrow a bomber from somebody because I've only got the 3. But on the other hand, it looks entertaining. And ultimately, regardless how well you do in a game, entertainment is the most important part of it.
100%. And that's what it's about.
Yeah, I mean, I recognize that Sean came to the table at one point. Sean O'Donoghue came to the table at one point with 4 Millennium Falcons with different pilots to them, and the whole goal was to throw garbage out to make everybody else's life miserable. I just don't. I still haven't figured out how you get that many Falcons on the table at the same time, or why you would buy that many Falcons.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. But it sounds like something Sean would do.
Yeah. It sounds spiteful, too.
Undoubtedly.
But anyway, I am going to go ahead and cut it a little bit short tonight because I think we've kind of exhausted the topic and we kind of covered everything that I wanted to go over. I've got a few notes for the upcoming weeks for folks, so I am going to go ahead and say good night to you, and I hope you have a great day. thanks for being on the show, Dex, and hope to have you back on soon.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's always a lot of fun.
All right, take care.
Bye.
So yeah, that is the interesting thing about just about any tabletop strategy game is going ahead and figuring out what you can do, what kind of crazy builds you can come up with that will challenge the other people at the table. And I think there's a lot more flexibility in X-Wing than people really give it credit for, so I'm really looking forward to trying some new things there. Having said that, I do want to let you guys know about the upcoming broadcast schedule. The timetable is correct. As I mentioned at the start of the show, we will be doing Tuesday night X-Wing tomorrow night at Chaotic Good. I'm going to make sure that I have an extension cord as well as have my battery charged so that this time we can actually get you the action that I was unable to get to you last Tuesday. Of course, Thursday night Armada is coming up as well. This time because, well, last week we had Thanksgiving, so I hope you guys had a wonderful Thanksgiving and really enjoyed yourselves. I had a great time, got together with family, it was a lot of fun, but of course we didn't have Armada because of that. It's been quite a few weeks since we've had Thursday night Armada. It is coming back, I promise you. I don't know if I'm going to be on the stream or if I'm going to have somebody else on the stream. I want to present to you the most interesting game, so I'm going to look at what folks are playing and figure out who's going to be on the stream Thursday based on that. Having said that, people are going to be getting ready for tournaments because December 9th there is going to be a store championship that is held in a store in Dayton. I'm trying to remember the name of the store. Give me just a moment and I can give you more details here. It is at the Forge, which is in Tip City, Ohio. There is a link at bestcoastpairings.com. I will try to get you that information as soon as I can. Let you get a heads up here and know that there is still some time before the event. Again, that is December 9th. So there is time to sign up. I think last I checked there were 13 people signed up. So there is an opportunity to jump in there. I have to wait until payday before I pay them for my entry, which means that if I don't get that in time, because it's topped out at 16 players, if I don't get my payment in on time, then I may end up just being there and streaming and maybe doing some commentating. There is also a tournament for X-Wing in Nashville that I'll try to get you some details on that will be going on the exact same day. So unfortunately, I had to choose which one I wanted to do, and while I have given you a couple of X-Wing tournaments and let you see how those run, I have yet to give you an Armada tournament, and I have yet to play in an Armada tournament myself, so I really wanted to have that experience, which is why I have chosen to go to the Armada tournament. Also, a little bit selfish of me, but the trip is a little bit shorter. So, Dayton is closer than Nashville to me. So that means that I will not have to stay up nearly so late, and I won't be as cranky later on. Also means that you'll get a good after-action report talking about what happens at that tournament. Anyway, it is a little bit early for me to say goodnight, but we've kind of exhausted the subject matter that I had for tonight. Kind of would have liked to have had some more guests on to talk about some other issues, but hopefully we'll be able to give you a more fleshed out show next time. Want to thank you guys for watching and remind you we are on Facebook, we are on Discord, we are on YouTube. Find us there and join, subscribe, like, do all the wonderful things so that we can grow the channel. At some point, if it starts picking up well enough, I may end up starting a Patreon so that we can get some kind of travel budget and maybe get some more refined rigs and such, and maybe some better background graphics, because I know you're probably tired of looking at this background graphic that I've had since the beginning. Anyway, good night, and I will see you next week.